At this point, you should have your inner frame complete and tack welded together. So as you can see here, I got my inner frame. It's all tack welded together and built to the specifications of what the blueprint says. So you need to have that done in order to move on to this next step. The next thing is we're going to cut out our outer frame pieces. So as you can see here, I have my outer frame piece A's and my 2 piece B's of my outer frame. But before you go and cut it, just a few things to note that are really important. So you kind of have a couple options here on how you can do this. If you're not experienced and don't have a bandsaw that's big enough to handle this tube, I would recommend going down to your local fabrication shop, taking the blueprint, take your materials, go down there, show them the blueprint. They'll be easy to zip these out in no time. Reason being, these lengths and angles need to be spot on in order for this bed to turn out really good. And this is the most expensive part of your bed, so if you screw these up, you're going to have to go spend a lot more money to get new tube. So if you're not experienced, just take it down to your local fab shop, take the materials and your blueprint, take it down there, and they'll get it done correctly the first time. If you are experienced and feel comfortable with a slitter disc, you can opt to do this yourself with a slitter disc, but again, that's a lot more complicated, so do that at your own risk. So before you run off and cut it, one last thing. You need to make sure that when you do cut these, that your factory seam, which I don't know if you can see it or not on this video, but if you look at your tube closely, there's going to be an obvious factory seam on one of the sides. You need to make sure that when you cut these pieces out, your factory seam is always going to be to the inside. So refer to your blueprint. It's going to have your exact measurements and angles to cut these pieces at, and it'll lay it out clearly in there. So either go down to your local fab shop, get these pieces cut, or do it yourself. And then once you get that done, come back and we'll move on to the next step. After you have all your outer frame pieces cut out, so my 2 piece B's are on the floor down here, but we're going to have to cut some wiring holes in our front outer frame piece, which is piece A from the outer frame diagram. So I have mine up here, and the inside of piece A is facing the camera. So this is the view from the top. As you can see, the inside of the 45-degree angle comes to the inside, or at least it should. So like I said, we're going to have to cut some wiring holes. We're going to need one on each side. So I've already cut one here so you can see what we're going for. This is a 2 inches tall by 3 inches wide hole, and it is 1 inch from the edge of your inside edge of your piece A. So the way you do this is I just use a cutting wheel on the grinder, and I have my other hole drawn here, and we're going to cut that one out. So obviously you're going to need to do that on both sides like I have shown here. And again, it's 1 inch inside your inside edge. And if you use a cutting wheel, you're probably going to have some little overlap lines after you get done cutting it, but not a big deal at all because this is not going to be seen by anyone. So it's just where the wiring is going to come out from our headache rack. So get those both cut, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, so we've just finished cutting out the light wiring holes in our front piece outer frame, which is our piece A from our outer frame diagram. As you can see here, I got my 2 piece B's from the outer frame diagram up here set on my inner frame. And if you haven't already noticed, we're just kind of going to use this thing as our work table from here on out and just build on it as we go. But if you cut these 2 piece B's for your outer frame out correctly, you should have 2 45-degree angles up at this end, up at the front end, and your seam should be on the inside, and then your 9-degree angle should be at the back. So I'm going to turn this to the side, and the next thing we're going to go over is how to and where drill your marker light holes. All right, so this is a side view. This is going to be the outside driver's side of your bed, and I have 3 3/4 inch holes drilled in here, and these are going to be where the marker lights go. So the number of markers and the spacing is kind of up to you, but if you just want to do the standard rule of thumb that I usually do, I would do 6 inches from each end. So this hole is 6 inches from the end of, and this is, again, this is the outside driver's side of your tube. Down here we're 6 inches from the end, and then this center hole is just centered, so the overall length divided by 2 and centered on that measurement. And then obviously it's centered vertically, which is what I recommend to look the best. So you're going to do that on the outside, drill those 3 3/4 inch holes, and then I'm going to flip this over to look at the inside. And as you can see, I also have 3 holes drilled directly across from the outside holes, and this is for your wiring to poke through of your marker lights. So basically, if you look in this hole, you should be able to look straight through the outside hole too and see daylight. And so basically just line these holes up with your outside holes. So there should be, if you're doing 3 marker lights, there's going to be 6 holes per side, and they're all going to be directly across from each other. So, and then we're going to do that for the other side as well. So go ahead and drill those, either with your drill press or your mag drill or your hand drill, and Lord have mercy on you if you're using hand drill. At this point, you should have all of your marker light holes drilled. So this is I've rotated this. So this is the driver's side of what's going to be my bed. My inner frame is here, so I've rotated this whole thing 90 degrees. So you guys are looking at the driver's side outside main frame tube. So like I said, at this point you should have all your marker light holes drilled in your driver's side and your passenger side. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut the fuel hole access hole, and so your hole size is going to differ based on if your pickup has a fuel and a diesel exhaust fluid. If it has both, you're going to want a long rectangle like this. If you just have one fuel type, aka just diesel, just gas, etc., then you're going to do a 4.5 inch by 4.5 inch square. So this one is for depth. If you have depth, you're going to do a 4.5 inches tall by 8 inches wide. And what I usually do is 18 inches back to the center of your rectangle. So the center of my rectangle is 18 inches from the front corner, and you're going to do the same on if you're doing a 4.5 by 4.5 inch hole. And then obviously 4.5 inches tall, centered up and down. So it should look like this. So basically what we're going to do is I'm going to cut this out with my slitter disc, and then I'm going to flip it over and show you how to cut out the inside hole as well. I got my fuel hole cut out. So like I said, if you just have one fuel type, you don't have diesel exhaust fluid, this should probably be a square. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut out the back, which is basically where your fuel outlet hose is going to come up through the frame. So I'm going to flip this over, and keep in mind when I flip this over, the top is going to flip over and be on the bottom. So you want to make sure that you know that this is the bottom, this is the inside. It should have the seam on the inside if you cut out your pieces correctly. And we're just going to cut the same size square, but as you can see, it is all the way up to the edge. That's because your fuel, when you mount it, it's going to have a slight downward slope, so it's going to come out lower on this back side than it did on the front side. But like I said, so this is looking at the outside, and this is the top. When I flip it over, the top became the bottom and the bottom became the top. And I just want to make sure that you get this right, because you definitely want to have it cut out on the correct side. So again, same size rectangle as you did on the front. Mine's going to be 4.5 by 8. If you have one single fuel types, it's going to be 4.5 by 4.5 inch square. And it just goes all the way to the edge, which is the bottom side, the same amount back. So it's going to be the same thing as your marker holes. You're going to want to look through the front side and directly look out the back side, since both of the rectangles should be lined up from how far they are from the front corner. So I'm going to go cut that out real fast. All right, so as you can see here, you can see all the way through the tube. I got the front side, which is the outside hole cut, and then also the backside hole. The backside hole is a little bit lower. It's the same size rectangle as you see on this outside, but it goes all the way down, and the edge of it actually runs just right along the edge of the tube. The reason for that is your fuel hoses are going to have a slight downward pitch when you actually install these. So we're going to put the fuel plate in here that came with your kit once we get this more put together, and it's going to be in there a little bit of an angle, allow your fuel to go a little bit at a downward pitch so it fills nice. So make sure you have both of these, the front side / outside hole cut out and the inside hole, and just make certain that you get them in the right place as far as the back hole and the inside hole being slightly lower than this front side outside hole.